Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with an imperialistic Charles Coulombe.
Imperialistic? What, you mean I'm conquering the world or something? Taking over colonies?
Is
that what you're saying?
Yes. In a sense, yes.
And what colonies have I taken over recently?
You're conquering the hearts and minds of the people.
Oh, very nice. I like the sound of that. Well, I will admit that there are perhaps two senses in which you could call me imperialistic. Perhaps two. The first is that, of course, I support the idea of the Holy Empire, incarnate in the Holy Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire. If it's got the double eagle, I kind of like it. That's true. And I have indulged my affection for that kind of thing unmercifully the past couple of weeks because of my impending departure from these fair shores. I've been to Schönbrunn. I've been out to the Kaiservilla in Ischl, out in the Salzkammergut, and as a result, stood in the rooms where in Schönbrunn, Kaiser Karl withdrew from government, and at the Kaiservilla at Ischl, where Franz Josef signed the declaration of war against Serbia. But today, I was out in a town called Korneuburg. Today, they had something called the Kaiser Parade, celebrating the 60th birthday of His Imperial and Royal Highness, the Archduke Karl von Habsburg, son of the Archduke Otto, grandson of Kaiser Karl. And to commemorate this auspicious occasion, there were a number of reenactment units and so on that did a tremendous parade. One of them was mounted horses and all that. It was a lot of fun. For a little while anyway, Austria-Hungary lived again, and it was great fun. It was wonderful. So on that side, the other side, imperialistic is also used to denote the Spanish, Portuguese, French, British, Dutch, and various other powers that spread Europe all across the world and basically set the foundations for the global civilization which we enjoy today. And that's why we're having this conversation. Now today, especially during the period of wokery, it's fashionable to point out all the terrible things that were done by the colonizers and ignore all the good ones. I believe in equal time. So I think that if you hate the whole idea of the colonial powers and their empires, you need to disengage and purify yourself. And I've got a series of steps you can take to purify yourself from the taint of colonialism and imperialism. You can free your mind. You can free your body from this horrible structure of power in the intersectionality between reality and academic stupidity. Here's what you do. First, you cease to use any European language. Secondly, you cease to use any European-based technology. Thirdly, you cease to use any European-based food. Fourthly, you give up all European-based medicine. Fifthly, if you're of European descent, you go to whatever part of the mother continent is filled with people who don't speak a European language. Maybe hard finding it. If you're not of European descent, stay wherever you are as long as it's where your people came from. So for instance, if you're an Indian in Trinidad or a Chinese in Los Angeles, you need to go home. And if you're black, you have to go back to Africa. If you're white, you've got to go back to Europe. Wherever your people come from, you have to go back. But again, even if you're European, you can't use European languages, clothing, food, technology, or medicine. Do this, ladies and gentlemen, and you will have freed yourself from the imperialistic taint. You'll be safe and pure.
What languages are Europeans supposed to speak then?
Though they shouldn't.
What?
No, Europeans are evil. Ask any woke moron.
They should speak Esperanto.
They shouldn't. No, God, no, that was invented by a European. No, they shouldn't speak anything. And if you hate European colonialism that much, you should refrain from using any European language. Now, there are other languages you can't use either, though. You couldn't use Chinese or Japanese.
Why?
Or, well, because both of those countries have been notoriously imperialistic, conquering various neighbors at different times. You can't use Swahili because that was invented by the Arabs to talk with their black slaves. So you can't speak in Swahili. Yeah. Can't speak that. You can't speak either Hindi or Urdu because they both descend from Hindustani, which was the language of the Mughal emperors alongside Persian. So you can't speak any imperial language.
You're really putting us in a box, Charles.
No, I'm not. They are. If you're stupid, you put yourself in a box and you belong there. All I'm doing is helping you nail the lid shut from inside.
I feel like I'm stuck in a Star Wars trash compactor right now.
Good place to be if you're a woke moron. I'm all for it. Just keep, it'll come in. See, the closer the compactor, the safer and purer you are from imperial overtones. And when you're compacted to about this big, you'll know you're not a structure of power yourself.
I aspire to be a post-structuralist.
Ooh, within the parameters of post-structuralist discourse, you may or may not have something. Who knows? Nobody else knows what it means. Why should you?
All right, Charles. Aside from wokery, what's new? What's going on? So this is our last episode before the in-house episode. We're gonna have to really do some dusting for the studio. We're gonna have to clean everything off.
That's, it's funny. Molly at the secretarial pool was complaining to me. She and Vera was saying that despite being told that they could get bonuses and overtime and all that, they say you've got a cleaning crew, and they are not, under any circumstances, even for extra pay, going to lower their standards and help clean up the studio.
Why not?
They're very adamant about that. There's a pecking order in your corporation, and the secretarial pool girls are all way above, at least they think so, the cleaning crew.
Well, I don't know why they would do that to themselves. I mean, that's just, they're begging for a meeting with Tyrone, so okay.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see Tyrone try to get anywhere beyond those bouffants the girls are wearing. There's a reason they call bouffants armor hair.
I've never heard that. Armor hair?
Mm-hmm. Big bouffant.
Well,
and ever since a few years ago when you issued the late 60s or the early 60s look, the bouffants are interesting enough, but the little bows you've got them wearing in the front of them. I mean, that went out with the first season of That Girl.
What do you mean you've got them wearing? These women do this on their own accord. It's part of the culture,
there are differing accounts, but whichever the case, watching them with the little bows in front of the big bouffants is very strange to me. I mean, it brings back memories. I'm not saying I'm not nostalgic for that era. And the music is all that, the canned music that keeps coming in is all from that period.
I thought we had this sort of discussion a long time ago where everyone has their own sense of normal.
Yeah.
Based on their childhood. So isn't this normal to you?
It's normal to me, but the girls in the secretarial pool, except for I don't want to say battle axe, but the lady who runs it, it's sort of the mother superior. Other than her, the girls are all much younger than I am. So it would be hardly their normal. It's my normal. When I go in there and I hear the Bristol Stomp playing, or there's a moon out tonight, or come and go with me, and all that. It's great for me, but I don't know how well these girls really relate to it. Oh, and the worst of it is several of them claim to be millennials, but I doubt that they really qualify because they're up bright and early every morning at 7:30. They're at their desks, and that's just not millennial behavior.
That's discrimination right there. That shows prejudice.
What, on my part?
Yeah.
Well, millennial chicks generally do not like getting up that early, and they never complain. They're all smiling. Good to see you, Mr. Coulombe. So you're coming back next week, we hear. That'll be great.
What about boomers? What about boomer chicks? When do they get up?
The only boomer chick in the secretarial pool is the Mother Superior. Well, the Mother Hen. Well, she's the only boomer chick now in the entire. The rest have been retired to the cleaning crew. The rest have been transferred to elsewhere within the company.
Right, Charles. Enough chit chat about the Tumblr House company culture. So
I don't know. Could there ever be enough? We get so many. It's amazing how many people these days comment on the inner workings of Tumblr House.
People are fascinated because it's so different from the rest of the world, and we embrace that. That's what we try to do.
To embrace diversity. No, speaking of imperialistic, yeah.
Yeah, you're in favor of it. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I am, and I have to say, all kidding aside, I am looking forward to next week's broadcast and getting back to the old studio, the endless supply of donuts in between takes. You'd forgotten about that. I haven't. Glazed.
Okay, I'll remember.
Glazed.
Have to.
And the endless cups of coffee, and oh man, that was great. I remember it's been over a year and a half, but driving up to the gate and having the fellow, even though he's seen me, how many hundreds of times. Oh, just a minute, sir. I've got to call and see if you're authorized. And he knows me.
It's called protocol.
It doesn't make any. Yeah. Oh, I'll say it's protocol. And then a couple of minutes go by. The phone rings again. Right. That's right, Chief. Thanks. You're clear to go, sir. And the gate opens and in I go. And then I pull into the garage and they come running out and they take the car. The valets rush off with it. And then starting on with the reception staff and going all the way up to the studios, stopping at every floor to say hello to everybody. I have to admit I am looking forward to that again. And sticking my nose in the commissary. The downside is that mackerel, because it's the end of the week. But anyway. And then, again, it'll be like the last time I did it. And the elevator stopped on the 13th floor. And then I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
Your morning routine at the tower?
Oh, yes, quite. So I'll stop at all the floors, and then finally I'll come out, quick run up to the meditation garden to see how well it's being kept, and then back down to the studio, and we'll get to work. And as I say, I'll have 4 or 5 glazed donuts before we start filming. 4 or 5 cups of coffee, 1 cup per donut, and then I'll be ready to roll.
Who's a legendary American back in the day? I remember it was Diamond something, and he was
Diamond Jim Brady.
There we go, Diamond Jim Brady. You're pulling a Diamond Jim Brady right now.
What? I like donuts. I like glazed donuts a lot. I like coffee. And I'm in exile. I haven't had a glazed donut all the year and a half. I mean, you basically owe it not just to me, but to all the donut makers of our great country. And don't forget, this is going to be the day before the 4th of July. You'll be stimulating the American economy. You'll be showing your solidarity with our wonderful country by making sure that I've got all the donuts I can possibly keep down.
Absolutely. Okay, and you too at home can stimulate the American economy by buying Tumbler House books.
Oh, wow. Really?
Absolutely. Free shipping on all orders over $25. Can you believe that, Charles?
Wow. All orders under $25?
That's right, Charles. You can get amazing books like Integralism, Every Man Today Called Rome, Vicars of Christ,
Wow.
and more. Be the
And if
first
you
on
act
your blog.
Act now. Any assembly required?
Some assembly required. Yes.
Batteries included?
Batteries are not included. Operators are standing by though, so act now.
Is it void where prohibited?
Void where prohibited. Yep.
And lastly, and perhaps most importantly for those of you living in Jersey, what about CODs?
Sorry, no CODs.
Snooky, I hope you heard that. You know that woman tried to get away with a COD on her last order of Tumbler House books?
It's ridiculous.
Can you imagine? Yeah, I know.
The
She
audacity.
she thinks this is a celebrity. She can get CODs. Snooky, honey, that's not how it works. And if you're listening right now, once again, sorry, no CODs. Are we clear on this?
All right, time for the memes of production.
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. All right, we just have one today, and it was submitted through Twitter from Friar NM. And so he says, want to know how I got these scars? This is a picture of a very young Charles Coulombe with Joker makeup. And apparently you bladed your mouth.
Bladed my smile.
Yeah, your smile. Yeah.
It makes you look like a living jack-o'-lantern, frankly.
You know, you keep saying that, you're this jack-o'-lantern, you're this chaotic neutral, but really there are a lot of similarities between you and Heath Ledger's Joker, and honestly, what's his face? Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, too, which is the smile thing. This compulsory smile that they
What's
have.
wrong with smiling?
Even though everything's horrible, they've got this smile.
Smile and the world smiles with you. Cry and you cry alone.
Who said that?
It's an old saying, like a stitch in time saves nine, and you know, the Rolling Stone gathers no moss. Act in haste, repent at leisure. Buy low, sell high. Keep your feet warm. Don't look both ways before crossing. A stitch in time saves nine.
You said that already.
Oh, did I? Okay. Let me see. Red sky in the morning, sailor take warning. Red sky at night, sailor's delight.
I thought we did this already. It was I wanted to name the title "Death by." I forgot what it was.
Death by cliche.
No, it was a different. It was based on your adjective, but basically all these sayings that you had. I forgot what a different. Started with a P. I thought.
A P.
I forgot.
Oh, by platitude.
Platitude. Yeah, there we go. I remember perfectly. Platitudinous was your adjective.
Yes, that's right. I was platitudinous. Yeah,
that's right.
Which, and I, you know what? I think platitudes have a great deal of folk wisdom,
as opposed to normal wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, like, don't speak unless spoken to. Children are best seen and not heard. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. A fool and his money is soon parted.
A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Two in the bush, yeah. You're getting into the spirit of the thing. This is the essential folk wisdom of the race, passed on from generation unto generation unto generation, and now available for us today, a fountain that any of us can drink from and enrich our own lives.
Wow,
it's true.
Some incredible imagery there. Drinking from a fountain to enrich our lives of these.
No, a fountain of wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a ton of these wonderful, wonderful things. Live in hope, die in despair. I mean, there's just so many of them.
I feel like you're trying to take this somewhere that I'm not foreseeing.
What do you mean?
Okay, that almost confirms it. That
suspicious mind is the sign of a dead conscience.
Wait, what?
A clear conscience is the sign of a fuzzy memory.
Is that how it goes?
Does now. Patience is a virtue practiced by few and acquired by none.
All right.
A stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet.
Okay. You're not going to pound me into submission with platitudes, Charles.
What you see? You immediately take this adversarial viewpoint. I'm trying to help you, okay? I'm trying to give you the benefit of the wisdom of the generations that preceded us.
Yeah, you want to use imagery to convey meaning? How about this? You're carpet bombing me with platitudes right now. That's what you're doing. This is what is this? Oh gosh, what is
carpet bombing you with platitudes?
Well, yeah,
wow.
Like you're basically Francisco Franco right now.
He never used platitudes. He had other things to carpet bomb with. He didn't use platitudes.
That was perfect response.
Well.
All right. Well, you got me there, Charles. I'm just.
No one ever accused Francisco Franco of torturing people with platitudes.
Okay, that's true. We got to give him that one. All right. Are we ready for the questions, or you've got more shenanigans you want to?
Shenanigans. You see, again, I'm cut to the quick because I'm totally misunderstood. As the song says, I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. It's true.
All right. Well, we've got. Carl says, I dig the fuchsia pill. It seems evident that standing up for election integrity or against anarchy will land a person in jail. So it's time for us to sit back and watch it all burn. I want to hear Charles take a fuchsia pill and talk like a policeman just watching his city burn at the command of his mayor. And talk like a neighbor watching the left beat and rob local businesses, knowing if he said anything, he will be labeled racist and thrown in the slammer. Wow.
Those are two different imitations, but I'll do my best. Well, ever since the defunding, there's not a lot we can really do about anything except recommend people wear their masks if an intruder comes in, because you don't want to be catching the COVID from him if he hasn't. And, now look over there. His Honor the Mayor's place is being attacked by a mob. Oh, that's so sad, the poor mayor. I wish we could do something about it, but I've only got one round in my gun, and they say you should save it for yourself. So I'm afraid I'll just have to watch. Oh, that's so sad. Ah, look at that. They're taking all the mayor's stuff. Look, they're taking those civic awards he got. Oh, look at them go. Isn't that funny? Oh, that's so sad. They just killed his poodle. Poor thing, probably tried to bite someone. Ah, well. Oh, and notice they're making a big bonfire in the front with His Honor's library. He collected a lot of rare books. Wow, much good is it? But they burn quick. They must be really old. Look at them go up. Oof. Well, this is exciting, but I think I'm going to go in, lock the door of the station house, and have a little nap. I wish His Honor the best, though. After all, he's sharing the fate of his citizens. And isn't that what a good mayor does?
We're all in this together.
That's right. As his honor's, the smoke and ruin of his honor's home shows us how. Good night, your honor, and best of luck. So that's the policeman. The other is watching the left rampage, huh?
Yeah, the neighbor.
Well, there's the left and there's the left. Let me see. Wow, look at that. They're going after the college bookstore. You know, that's funny. You can tell they don't know how to read because, like, they're not really looking at any of the books. They're just torching them. That's too bad. Oh, look at the Fern Bar. Yeah, that's sad. Because, you know, a lot of intellectuals used to gather there, but not anymore. It looks like they're just drinking everything.
Additional context, you know, if you say anything, you'll be labeled racist and thrown in the slammer.
Yeah. What's wrong with that? No, it's fine. I mean, people are just expressing themselves. It's, oh, look at that. Gee. You know, it looks like there's like a tension between two groups who both have needs. I wonder who's going to win. I don't want to say who they are, but wow. I think they're both intent on ethnic cleansing of one kind or another. That's interesting. Yeah. You know, I'd like to comment on this all night, but I see my wife's just filled up the car, and like we're gonna go. I mean, we're not doing this because of what's going on. We were like planning to go see my brother-in-law anyway, but he lives out in the woods, so like we're gonna head out there now. But yeah, that's interesting. Okay, well, I don't know if we're gonna make it back because like my brother-in-law invited us to stay out there for a long time, so we're probably not gonna get back for a while. But anyway, I wish everybody luck, and yeah, bye bye.
All right.
How was that?
I was okay.
Fuchsia pilled enough?
Boy, that fuchsia pill's really personality erasing.
It helps. I mean, probably if he wasn't living under the threat of being arrested and thrown in the slammer, he would have been more expressive. More like, oh, isn't that sweet? All their shops are going up in flames now. Too bad, so sad. I'd love to be able to do something about it, but then I can't. See, but that could be interpreted as hostility. So even under the influence of the fuchsia pill, it's quite possible to purge your personality of any possibly disagreeable elements. The downside is that you're perhaps somewhat less amusing to listen to.
I see.
But safer.
All right. We have a question from Thomas. I neglected to read this to you on our prep, Charles, but Thomas says he has a question on the housing market. Hello, gentlemen. I have a question for Charles regarding the state of the housing market as it is currently. Seeing that Charles has more experience than me when it comes to real-world things, I figure I'd ask. What?
Does this guy live in a convent?
My parents are getting on me about getting my own home. My dad bought his first home at the age of 23, but I try to explain to them that it's a different world. Seeing that I'm also on the East Coast, the cost of living is already expensive, and boomers are buying up homes left and right for thousands over the asking price. I drove around my area of Northeast Jersey looking at a few homes, hoping the amount I had saved up would make a good down payment. But no, all 3 homes I looked at were sold before I could even put in my offer. As I sit on my couch, defeated once again, I come to ask for your help. Who really needs a house out in Hackensack? Is that all I get for my money? And it seems such a waste of time, if that's what it's all about. Charles, if that's moving up, then I'm moving out. No, this isn't a serious question. Happy Feast of John the Baptist, my favorite French-Canadian blooded male.
Oh, Anthony.
Thomas.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. You know, he's saving his money for someday.
Oh, right.
You know, and I can understand that. personally. I really, really can, because not too long ago, I went down and had a drink down at Mr. Cacciatore's down on Sullivan Street, across from the medical center.
Yeah.
I actually, early August, I'm going to be back in the village, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be down on Sullivan Street. Mr. Cacciatore's no longer exists, but I'm sure I'll find some place to have a drink near the medical center.
All right. Well, you enjoy that, Charles. You enjoy New Jersey.
Well, that's New York.
So
you got to remember, the idea here, again, this is, as you said before, you've lost touch with your Northeastern roots. But the deal was the people who lived and worked in New York looked forward to retirement somewhere in the burbs, of which New Jersey was a prominent collection. So, I mean, that's why Andrew from New Jersey is so proud of having moved out to New Jersey from Long Island, because that was sort of an aspiration to have a house out in Hackensack. So, you don't realize that Anthony's working in at Mama Leone's and all that was in the city. Mr. Cacciatore's down by the medical center was in Manhattan.
Okay.
But their dream was to leave the city and the compactness and the crime and this and that, and move out to the relative paradisical state of or Long Island,
Wait,
but further out on the
island. The last thing I heard was paradisical state.
They wanted to move out to the paradisical state of New Jersey, or up to Westchester or Staten Island, the Dutchess, or out on Long Island, but a lot further west or further east than Queens. And that was the big aspiration, to get out of the city. Some people, including your family and mine, took it perhaps a little far, going all the way out to SoCal.
They're smart. SoCal versus New Jersey, not a question. Even though Andrew from New Jersey at the end of the pre-show, what did he said one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my entire life. New Jersey is the California of the Northeast.
That's what he said, and he sticks by it. And I can see why he would say it. I can see a certain amount of justification. I mean, look, Snooki would be perfect in California if she tinted her hair blonde.
Maybe the people are comparable, but not the sites, not what is actually in the state.
Oh, I disagree.
San Francisco is filled with a bunch of crazy people, but it's a beautiful city.
So is Bayonne.
Bayonne,
New Jersey. It's like San Francisco in a way.
Yeah? Tell us about that.
It's surrounded by water on three sides. And it's across from Manhattan, the way San Francisco is across from Oakland.
Is that it?
Frank Sinatra lived there.
Frank Sinatra lived in Palm Springs, too.
Yeah, well. So
right.
what? I don't care.
See,
actually, he lived in Hoboken. He didn't live in Bayonne, but never mind. And wait, there's more. Staten Island is like Catalina.
Okay, just that's not even funny. That's just
it's not New York. I mean, it's not New Jersey. It's in New York, but still.
That's too far.
You don't think Staten Island is like Catalina?
I think you should be horsewhipped for even suggesting such a thing.
What are you talking about?
What do you mean? What am I talking about?
You seem very defensive of Catalina all of a sudden.
There's no comparison.
What is your obsession with chewing gum?
What?
I asked, what is your obsession with chewing gum?
I love chewing gum. What's your problem with chewing gum?
This is my point. This is exactly my point. That's why you're obsessed with Santa Catalina Island, because it was owned by the Wrigley people. Wrigley's Chewing Gum were the owners of Catalina, and that's why you're so irrationally defensive, because of your obsession with chewing gum.
But I hate Chicago.
Well, that may be, but you love chewing gum, and the Wrigley's apparently didn't like it either. They wouldn't have moved to Catalina. See?
Wrigley isn't the only chewing gum.
No, but it's your favorite.
No,
And it's because of their connection with Catalina.
I don't like that. I like double mint. Double your flavor, double your fun.
Made by Wrigley.
Is it Wrigley?
Yes. And let me tell you something. You'd be just as crazy about Staten Island if Wrigley's had owned Staten Island instead of Catalina. Then you'd be whining at me that, oh, how can you compare Catalina with a great place like Staten Island?
All right, Charles, I am shutting down this discussion.
What happened to freedom of speech and acceptance of diversity?
It's a fiction.
All right. I can live with that.
All right. All right. On to the real questions.
All right.
From Anne, she says, "Greetings, Charles and Vinny. In the history of the church, many martyrs have suffered horrible and gruesome deaths for the faith. Who are some of your personal favorites, and would you both please share some with us? And can you explain why they are your favorites?"
You want to go, or shall I?
I'll go, because mine is very simple. I'm really this past year, I've really been hot on St. Thomas More, reading his books, keep watching A Man for All Seasons, because of the nature of things, where all the leaders are just making the easy decisions. And if we just had one St. Thomas More, it really speaks to me, Thomas More's situation, and perhaps the situation we're in with the vaccinations and other stuff. I don't want to talk too much about it, but where everybody is forced into one direction, and there's no question. St. Thomas More really speaks to me, so that's my pick.
All right, mine is St. Lawrence. Roasted on a gridiron, and he said, "You can turn me over now. This side's done." Plus, it is quite likely that he sent the Holy Grail to Spain from its Roman holding place. He was the deacon of Pope Sixtus II when Sixtus was arrested. His own arrest followed, but he asked for some time because they said, "We want you to surrender the treasures of the church." So he sent the Grail off to Spain and brought all the poor people whom the church was supporting and said to the Roman governor, "Here you are, here are our treasures. Behold, aren't they wonderful?" And the governor was somewhat less than pleased, so that's why he had him fried on a gridiron. And his response was, "You can turn me over now. This side's done. Have a bite."
That's like a good refutation for those liberals that hate the church, but then they complain about how extravagant and rich the Catholic Church is. And you say, well, our treasures are our poor people.
See, that's the thing. I mean, the church is horrible because it's too poor, because it's too rich, because it's too rigid, because it's not rigid enough. But, you mentioned St. Thomas More. My favorite line of his was when he was going up to have his head chopped off. And he said to the headsman, "Help me up, Sir Headsman. And as for coming down, I'll shift for myself."
Okay. Yeah.
What else we got?
Question from Brian. He says, "Dear Vincent and Charles, I recently got in hot water with my Protestant family as I could not declare with absolute certainty that my late mother is in heaven. How can I get my father to shift his focus from the complex issue of faith versus works to the issues that brought me into the church, such as authority and the Eucharist? How can I explain without offending him the passage that, without the bread of life, you have no life in you? It was an emotional conflict that has since gotten better thanks to many prayers. But further prayers for their conversion and concord in the family would be much appreciated. If you could also pray for the repose of the soul of my beloved mother, Teresa, I would also be much obliged.
Well, let's do that first, and then we'll see what we can do in terms of an answer.
Yeah.
Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Santa Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Well, actually, you've just outlined the point entirely. Ask him what he thinks it means, that line in the Bible, before you ask him, what does that mean, Dad? If it's symbolic, it doesn't make any sense. But if it's not symbolic, it's very hard to understand.
Yeah.
The faith without works thing, I mean, the Epistle of St. James is very clear. Faith without works is dead. Just as the what was I saying? The faith without works is dead. And then what's the other? My mind is gone.
The passage on
Romans.
the bread of life. You have no life in you.
Right. But also in Romans, when Paul says that the good man is justified by faith, and then St. James says, but faith without works is dead, it's obvious that you have to have both.
Yeah.
So, but above all, pray and remember that the biggest problem for your father is not really doctrinal. It's admitting he's been wrong to himself. That's very hard. So you got to pray very hard that his will be improved.
All right. Daniel says, I know I am just a lowly custodian, but I would like to humbly follow up with the Caesar of the Tumbler House Empire, Charles the Greatest of the Tumbler House media talent, with my previous question on the United Nations. With the permission of the illustrious Lord of the Tumbler House Empire, the Augustus Vincent Franchini, the Enforcer, I beseech you to command your junior emperor to answer the core of my original question. If you were in charge of the fate of the UN, would you abolish it or keep it? Most importantly, what would happen to the balance of power in the world without the UN? Would the world be better off without it?
Let's answer them in reverse order. I think that the UN, as it stands, is a real problem. I think if its issues were resolved, the world would be a lot worse off without it. And again, I look at the UN the way I look at both the EU and the U.S. federal government. When they're good, they're very good. When they're bad, they're satanic. I mean, they are realities that have developed over a long period of time. The benefits are fast being eclipsed by the problems. So, but at the moment, I think the problem, the world, the world would probably not be better off at the moment if the UN were abolished. But how long that's going to remain the case, I can't tell you. How would I reform the UN? Well, several ways. The biggest one would be to shut down all the gender equality things and the LGBTQ MLXL5 crap and the abortion stuff, the euthanasia, and all the usual wokery. I'd end all that and return the I'd return to the UN to its original purpose, which was to attempt to prevent nations from going to war with each other. That's a laudable goal, and mind you, we've had things that long predated the UN. The World Court, for instance, goes back to 1900. And incidentally, you'll never guess who the major popularizer and force behind the establishment of the World Court was. Want to give it a guess?
Woodrow Wilson?
Not in 1900. He wasn't president.
The World Court?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Netherlands, in The Hague.
I don't know.
Tsar Nicholas II. Teddy Roosevelt was another one. Now, I know there are a lot of people who will immediately bristle and say, oh, it's one world government and so forth. Well, the problem we have is that we live in a world that is now very globalized. What we're doing right now is global. There are episodes of this show out there with subtitles in languages from Slovak to, I don't know, Bengali. And we all of us, as a rule, if we're online, are in touch with like-minded people from around the globe in a way that when I was a boy would have been unthinkable. It was a big deal for us to have pen pals with whom we exchange a letter every 2 weeks. Now, how many people, as soon as they get up, are suddenly in touch with people around the globe? Just boom. I know I am. So you do have a system where everything from the economy to flat-out crime is now worldwide. Well, how do you deal with that? You have to have some means of dealing with it. But on the other hand, that means A, has to have a good end, and B, there has to be behind it an animating philosophy, a principle, a sort of state church, if you will, that gives it legitimacy and it makes some sense out of it. And this is why when Benedict XVI spoke about this in one of his encyclicals, a lot of people were upset when he said there had to be a world authority with some sort of oomph to it, some sort of teeth, as he put it. Well, I could agree. Maybe not this one, maybe not the UN as we know it, but there's got to be something. In medieval Europe, it was the idea of the Sanctum Imperium, the Holy Empire. The UN as we know it, like the EU, like the US, has gone in very different directions from either what its founders necessarily envisioned, or for that matter, what any decent person wants. But that doesn't mean the idea itself is completely wrong. One of the things Eric von Ledeen said in his book Leftism, which I think is very true, is that in America, the quote-unquote conservatives made a big mistake by leaving internationalism, culture, and the arts and academia to the left to play with, and just focused on economic stuff and some political. And I think he was right. I'd add conservation and historic preservation and things like that as well.
So you would keep the UN and not abolish it?
I would keep it if it could be maintained with the evil elements cut out of it. The question is, could you do that? And the answer is, I don't know.
Okay. All right, Aaron says, greetings and salutations to the happy Canadian chap and his oppressiveness, Don Vincenzo, Baron of Books, Marquess of Mismanagement, Hegemon of Catholic Publishers, and Grand Prince of Confused Eyebrows during Charles's rants.
That's you.
I was going to submit 2 questions regarding integralism. Insert book plug here. You couldn't be more correct, Aaron. Oh, integralism. We still have like about 15 copies.
How much do they cost?
This is it's actually $31 or $32, which you know what that means?
I do. It means, hold on, free shipping and handling, ladies and gentlemen. Order right now and you get this amazing slicer dicer. Operators are standing by to take your call. Batteries not included, some assembly required, void where prohibited by law. Sorry, no CODs. Not an actor. Be the first on your block.
Wow, you nailed it. Well done, Charles.
Thank you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, so...
But wait, there's more.
Wait, there's more. Send in a book review. Immediately get $5 off your order. All right. So Aaron goes on to say, however, I cannot threaten pillaging as I am not a Magyar, and since I'm not sure what Slovenes have done, I just call myself Carniolan. What is that? Carniolan? Carniolan, and LARP as an Austrian. I'm not sure how to threaten you into answering. Therefore, I humbly ask that my question be answered and that my storefront windows be left intact.
We can work on both of those.
Okay, so his question. Would you address the recent attacks on the theory of integralism by what would normally be considered very conservative Catholics, characterizing it as a quote-unquote Catholic Sharia? I've noticed a considerable trend recently with Catholics who lean the right way and are allies in most ways furiously attacking more traditional theories of governance, even when those theories are in fact merely theoretical at the moment given the state of things. It's understandable, given the state of the church, that one would be wary of giving the current clergy temporal power, but to be as fervent in attacking a currently relatively academic theory of implementing Catholic social teaching, as they are with Islam and the Democratic Party, seems unusual. To me, it comes off as a somewhat desperate neocon PR campaign to try and salvage the rotting corpse of classical liberalism and the American founders, all in a vain attempt to preserve the mythos of America US they grew up with, at the expense of the church. What are your thoughts?
Well, you summed them up pretty well for me. I mean, I don't really have a lot to add to that, except that, I'm always sorry when those sorts of attacks are mounted, partly because the sheer fury of them, the intensity, is kind of unsettling. Because, as you say, these are all academic questions at the moment. And secondly, it does feel as though they want to make for themselves some sort of quote-unquote respectability in front of our non-Catholic brethren. They don't want to look bad. I don't want to attribute impulses to people who hold those views, but I certainly couldn't.
I mean, to me, when you see Catholics, good Catholics, attack like monarchy, integralism, I mean, I have to hold myself back because I just laugh and think to myself, don't worry, dude. You don't have to worry about that in our lifetime. Trust me. Everything's great right now. It's actually the opposite of these things. So you don't have to worry. There's a lot of things you have to worry about. Integralism and monarchism aren't two things you have to worry about. So chillax.
Yeah. Don't you worry. President Joe Biden will take care of it.
Yeah, it's going to be fine. That's funny. Anyhow. All right. Second question from Aaron. An argument against integralism used by some modern Americanists, many of which are conservative in most ways, is to appeal to the case of Edgardo Mortara, the Jewish-born boy in the Papal States who was taken by Pius IX after being secretly baptized due to the law requiring baptized Catholics receive a Catholic upbringing. Most treatments of this case seem to ignore Mortara's own writings, and I understand the defense of Pius IX given Mortara's later vocation. But the whole thing still feels wrong in my gut. Can you address what happened and whether it was justified? Thank you and God bless.
Well, God bless you. Firstly, the bad feeling in your gut is because of where and when you were raised. Same for me.
Yeah.
Edgardo Mortara, I think, is probably a better judge of his case than we are. Remember, we tolerate abortion. Our culture drips with infant blood and the desecration of marriage. So we're able to coexist with that. we're not really in a good position to judge the past, especially the Catholic past. Point one. Point two, because we know that our judgment is defective due to what we do tolerate, and we know that Mortara himself was pleased with the way things eventuated, and we know that Pius IX was simply operating off what had always been standard practice for the Church in Catholic countries. Why don't we reserve that ill feeling in the gut for the system we live under now? Why don't we look at our masters and owners and have that same every time we look at a pro-abortion politician, we should be a little sick to the stomach.
You know what? I wasn't aware of this Mortara argument, but you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of all these other bad will, disingenuous arguments about other things, whether it's a fallen away Catholic trying to examine some of the more complicated issues regarding social policies and in deciding, oh, I can't do the Catholic faith. Well, that's more complicated. You're picking the most complicated issue from that, and you're deciding, okay, the Catholic faith is not for me. Why don't you start with, is Jesus God? Why don't you start there? And let me just.
And if he is God, does he have the right to command me to do stuff?
Right. I mean, you start there. Another example, again, it's not one-to-one to this Mortara thing, but the pro-abortion thing regarding rape. Like, oh, what if, has cancer and she was raped and all this and that, and it's, basically creating the stickiest scenario in order to promote this policy. Like, oh, well, can you be pro-life in this most difficult of examples in the world? And so that's what I feel like is happening here. It's like, oh, can you be integralist in this most difficult example in the world?
All right. Well, let's try it another way. Let's pretend for a minute that you believe that abortion was murder.
Okay.
But you lived under a regime that, if you don't pay taxes that pay for such murders, will punish you severely. Well, I mean, it's hard to believe that, but let's pretend.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, would you be complicit with the murders that your regime is spending your money on? Especially given that you're not really protesting it or showing any kind of resistance.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the big question that I brought about, like the good Germans, right? Except we're more liable than them, in my opinion.
Oh, but if that's true, then I revert to my original statement. What right do we have to judge Pius IX and Edgardo Mortara?
Yeah. It's just,
in a nutshell, where do we get off?
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that it always annoyed me, but as we've gotten increasingly depraved and stupid, with our rainbow flags all over the place, I cringe whenever I go down the street in Vienna by the American Embassy and watch the rainbow flag flying proudly from the flagpole. Is that what my country is?
It's funny given the, sorry to derail, but I'm just thinking about this more, the Mortara thing. So the Pope adopted Mortara, right?
No.
It's funny that we should, because obviously the Pope treated Mortara well, and Mortara said, this is great. And it's even more absurd in the context, because we don't talk about this a lot in the United States, but in the context of foster care, where people are charged with the stewardship of children. And
very often betray it.
And more than that, it's an epidemic. I was talking with people who are, because those of you who aren't in California, we're having a homeless crisis, right? It's getting worse and worse. And I was talking with someone involved, you know, and talking with them about the reasons for it. And basically, there are two reasons. One is it's mentally ill people who should, you know, be getting treatment, but
somewhere.
because of, you know, I know problems with our system, they're not getting the treatment that they deserve. And then the other thing is foster care gone horribly wrong, and then these people are just ditched on the street, and they just can't make it. And so we're criticizing that from happening, but we're not remotely, we don't even look, we don't even talk about, we don't even think or analyze our foster care system in the United States. That's just sort of a dirty little thing that we sweep under the rug.
Yeah, and I mean the widespread abuse of children that takes place in various ways in the foster system. I mean, time and again you'll hear people say, "Oh, I can't let my niece, my little cousin, whatever, go into the foster system because they'll be destroyed." Well, when people say that, that's a tacit acknowledgement that it's screwed up. Well, it's a hard thing, but again, the problem with the way we look at these things from Edgar Martyr to the Inquisition of the Crusades is that there's the tacit implication that we're in an area of moral perfection from which we're able to judge. But it ain't so. It ain't so.
Yeah, really what it comes down to is, oh, that's foreign, that's alien, that feels weird compared to the sludgery that we wade in. See, we're used to our...
We're used to it.
Yeah.
We're used to it. Our sewage smells good to us.
Yeah. Yeah. So, interesting stuff. All right, we got a couple questions from Anita to finish off the show. She says, "Greetings, gentlemen. I have a couple of questions for Charles. Okay. Lately, I've been watching a lot of Sherlock Holmes as portrayed by the late, great Jeremy Brett. The greatest scenes Holmes, in my personal opinion. India, of course, figures large in the Sherlock Holmes stories. The number of Holmes's adventures have their roots in the Great Mutiny of '57. I'd like to hear Charles wax eloquent on the Sepoy Mutiny, its causes, its consequences, and I'd appreciate if Don Vincenzo would bid him to do so. Charles, please do so."
All right. Well, basically, the India in 1857 was dominated not by Britain as a government, but by the British East India Company, John Company. And they acted as a de facto government, but they weren't. They were a private trading company. They had armies, they made war against various Indian princes, and by this time they had come to dominate the peninsula, the subcontinent, as it were. However, at the same time, the Mughal Empire had not completely ceased to exist, but the Mughal courts survived in Delhi basically as the pensioners of the British East India Company. Now, another factor is that for a long time, the company, because it was there to make profits and not to attempt moral reform of any kind, made profits and didn't attempt moral reform. And as long as they did that, they got along fairly well with a lot of the Indians. But starting in the 1820s and 30s, the evangelical movement, in the wake of the Oxford movement, swept Anglicanism. And the idea of evangelizing the Indians and making Christians out of them became very strong. And a lot of evangelical Protestant missionaries came to India. They began interfering with a lot of Indian customs, like sati, the widow throwing herself on her husband's funeral pyre, that kind of thing. So this caused a certain creative tension. But what really started the Sepoy revolt, remember that the Sepoys were either Muslim or they were Hindu. Now, to the Muslims, pigs were unclean. And if you had anything to do with pigs or pork, you were unclean. To the Hindus, cows were sacred and couldn't be molested. So the rumor went out that the new rifles that the sepoys, the native troops of the East India Company, had been issued, were used a mixture of pork and cattle grease.
The rifles
Yeah.
used pork and cattle grease?
Well, they used grease, but the sepoys didn't know what it was, that, to keep the inner workings going.
Yeah.
And the rumor was spread that it was mixed cattle and pork grease, which of course would be enough to annoy both sides.
It's just so random, like gun grease, It's...
Well, I mean, basically, the idea was that use of their weapon would make the Muslims unclean and the Hindus sacrilegious.
Yeah.
So this would get everyone upset, and the sepoys would revolt. And that's what happened. They then forced the Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah III to sort of act in concert with them, although he was a very old man and not very happy with being made to do anything. So there were a lot of terribly bloody sieges where a lot of British died, Cawnpore and Lucknow and places like that, and some atrocities. So the British struck back very, very hard, and they suppressed the Sepoy Mutiny. But the reputation of the company was destroyed in Britain, and the Mughal emperor was deposed as an associate and an ally of the revolt. Well, 10 years later, shortly after this, led the British government to rearrange Indian government. The British government took over direct control and established what was called the Raj. And in 1867, Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, arranged to have Her Majesty Queen Victoria, Queen of Great Britain and Ireland, solemnly proclaimed Empress of India. And the idea was that she was the successor of the Moguls. And so the British establishment in India was called the Empire of India. And it included modern-day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, for a while Burma, for a while Aden in southern Arabia. And initially the capital was what the British, where they had started controlling, Calcutta. But in 1911, it shifted to the seat of the Moguls, to New Delhi. And there, the capital of India has been ever since. And what's now the presidential residence was built as the Viceroy's Palace. The Viceroy being the representative of Her Majesty the Queen or His Majesty the King, the Emperor of India, the King Emperor. Yes, indeed. In the name of the Empress, the Overland Mail. There's a wonderful poem because, of course, after that was done, the everything became imperial in India. The Imperial Forest Service, the Imperial Library. It was constantly the Empress this and that, Imperial this and that. So Kipling, that great poet of British India, came up with this poem called The Overland Mail, Foot Service to the Hills. And basically the mail would go around India to by rail to the various railheads, and then native postmen would literally walk it through whatever kind of climate, whatever kind of terrain there might be, from the railhead up into the hill stations where the Europeans were. So this is the Overland Mail, foot service to the hills. In the name of the Empress of India, make way, O lords of the jungle, wherever you roam. The woods are astir at the close of the day. We exiles are waiting for letters from home. Let the robber retreat, let the tiger turn tail, in the name of the Empress, the Overland Mail. With a jingle of bells as the dusk gathers in, he turns to the footpath and heads up the hill. The bag's on his back and a cloth round his chin, and tucked in his waist belt the post office bill. Dispatched on this date as received by the rail, per runner, 2 bags of the Overland Mail. Is the torrent in spate? They must ford it to swim. Has the rain wrecked the road? He must climb by the cliff. Does the tempest cry halt? What a tempest to him! The service admits not a but or an if. While the breath's in his mouth, he must bear without fail, in the name of the Empress, the overland mail. From aloe to rose oak, from rose oak to fir, from level to upland, from upland to crest, from rice field to rock ridge, from rock ridge to spur, fly the soft sandaled feet, strains the brawny brown chest. From rail to ravine, to the peak from the vale, up through the night goes the overland mail. There's a speck on the hillside, a dot on the road, a jingle of bells on the footpath below. There's a scuffle above in the monkey's abode. The world is awake and the clouds are aglow. For the great sun himself must attend to the hail. In the name of the Empress, the overland mail.
Very nice, Charles. Very nice.
Well, you can imagine this little Indian runner and his answer to any kind of problem or anything else, in the name of the Empress, the overland mail.
Yeah.
And so it was until the year of our Lord, 1948, when on June 23rd, subsequent to India and Pakistan becoming independent in 1947, George VI abandoned the title of Emperor of India and instead became King of India and King of Pakistan. He would give up the title King of India in 1950, and his daughter, Queen Elizabeth, would cease to be Queen of Pakistan in 1956, 99 years after the Sepoy Mutiny.
All right. Anita also asks, I would like to hear Charles discuss Marshal Philippe Petain, of whom I bet a growing number of college kids have never heard. Those of us who did hear about him were taught that he was a defeatist, a Nazi collaborator, and a convicted traitor. I realized I had to take a second look at Petain when I read Tessier de Mallarè's biography of Archbishop Lefebvre, that Lefebvre honored Petain and paid tribute to him at his tomb in 1987. Was Petain's real crime that he signed an armistice with Hitler, or was it that he tried to roll back the ideology of the French Revolution?
Well, a little of both, but particularly the second, because as we know here in Austria, Karl Renner, the socialist, collaborated with the Nazis from the beginning. He ordered the socialists to vote for the Anschluss in 1938. He sucked up to them continually while they occupied here. And then in 1945 jumped ship to work with Joe Stalin and died as president of Austria. So we can tell that collaborating with the Nazis couldn't have been all of it, or everybody would hold up Karl Renner for the kind of scum he was. Petain's story was interesting. In the 1914 to 1918 war, Petain was really the victor of Verdun, the savior of France. And he was a great hero in the eyes of the French, including one of his great military disciples, a young armor lieutenant named Charles de Gaulle. Well, it's important to bear in mind that a lot of people, including Petain, felt as the 1920s and 30s went by that France's anti-Catholic, and remember, for most of his life, he wasn't a great believer himself, but he believed that France had separated itself from her great past and become rather degenerate. And people like this, including Petain, saw the defeat by the Germans in 1940 as the result of that degeneracy. So, for people of his mind, the idea was that this terrible defeat, which didn't take very long, a little over a month when the Germans got going, could be a blessing in disguise, an attempt to revive the French nation, to purify it of its various problems, so that once again, France could lift up her head amongst the nations of the world. And that meant undoing a lot of the evil done by the French and the first French and subsequent revolutions. Well, that was the idea. And the French Parliament voted Petain full power to negotiate the armistice. And he did. He did make several promises to Britain because they had been allies. One of them was that if the Nazis tried to get the French fleet, he would scuttle it. And that's very important to remember. So he signs the armistice, and initially he begins what was called the Révolution Nationale, the French, the National Revolution, which was this attempt to revitalize France from the bottom up. And he had a lot of good ideas, some of which survived his regime in terms of de Gaulle. But what he perhaps had not bargained on was that the Germans were not really honest. At least to say the Nazis weren't. They were not happy at all with the idea of a traditional France revitalizing herself. So as the time went on, they pressured de Gaulle to get rid of the traditional Catholics in his regime and replace them with ex-socialists like Pierre Laval. And he wasn't in a position to say no. But it became much worse in 1942, because at that point, the United States and Britain attacked French North Africa. Well, France had been divided because of the armistice with Germany into two zones, the occupied and unoccupied zone. Petain and his government were in the unoccupied zone in a town called Vichy, which is why they're also called Vichy French, as opposed to de Gaulle's Free French. When the British and the Americans seized North Africa, the Germans invaded unoccupied France, and they made straight for Toulon and the French fleet. But in keeping with his promise to Churchill, Petain ordered the French fleet scuttled. And believe me, if that hadn't happened and fallen into German hands, things would have been a little bit different. So the Germans, in return, very quickly made Petain a prisoner, and they imprisoned him in a town in Germany called Sigmaringen. And eventually, when Sigmaringen fell, he was released and then tried for treason in France and sentenced initially to death. His former disciple, Charles de Gaulle, commuted it to life imprisonment. And he died in prison when he was a very old man, reconciled to the church. So that's the story of Marshal Petain. He has furious admirers and furious detractors. But again, in a world where Karl Renner is considered a hero, nobody has anything to say about anything. And I would say further, it's interesting that in the Far East, people like Henry Puyi and the Emperor Manchukuo and the various Chinese who collaborated with the Japanese are considered horrible traitors. But figures in Burma and Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, who collaborated with the Japanese against the various colonial powers, are considered nationalists and independence heroes. So, to answer her question, I would say that our memory of collaborators in the Second World War is extremely selective, based as much or more upon ideology than on the fact of collaboration.
All right.
Again, we are the worst people to make these judgments. How far do we collaborate with intense and horrific evil in our everyday lives?
We're Chinese collaborators.
I've had the COVID, Mr. Smart Guy. I am internally connected to that lab in Wuhan.
That will stay with you forever. You will carry that in your heart.
I will, and in my genes. And it what can I tell you? You know, the decision of a doctor to sell lab animals on the food market in Wuhan on such small, seemingly small events to entire lives turn. Little did he know that he was buying for me a couple of months of free travel. I mean, restriction-free travel.
Yeah, but you had restriction-free travel before.
Now you're going to be saying that we never wore masks before last January.
Yeah, actually.
You're going to say that we didn't have to maintain social distancing. You're going to say we were allowed to eat in the restaurants and bars of our choice.
I'm going to say that.
Why do you spread these lies? It's always been like this.
What are you, Winston from 1984 with the memory holes?
Yes.
Is that your job? You just get in the piece of paper and then you throw it down the tube?
Yes, that's right. What's wrong with you? You've got to accept your owners.
Look it. All I'm saying, Charles, is make Orwell fiction again. And you're literally living it.
It's true. As they say, somebody needs to tell our masters that 1984 was not a how-to book, but a dystopian novel. But they've kind of lost that. I don't know, the poor dears. Anyway, well, a couple of things coming up this week. For one thing, this is my last broadcast for several weeks. I'll be returning to, my last broadcast in Austria. I'll be returning here on the 17th of August. But in the meantime, I'll be in the States. The 1st of July is coming up, as you know, and the 1st is a very important date for several reasons. Firstly, for those of you who are really into our Lord, it is on the traditional calendar, the Feast of the Precious Blood. Secondly, for those who are like into saints and stuff, or into California, it's the Feast of Saint Junipero Serra. Thirdly, for those of you who are Canadian, it is Dominion Day, the anniversary of the signing of Confederation by great men like Sir John A. Macdonald, Sir Etienne Cartier, and McGee was his last name. Thomas Darcy McGee, something like that. Anyhow, there were a lot of others. Great men all, despite the attempts by Justine Trudeau and other ladies of both sexes up north to attack their memory. It is also the anniversary of my father's death in 1996. So, of your charity, please pray for the repose of the soul of Guy J.C. Coulombe, my dad. Next week, we'll be broadcasting from the Tumbler House Tower, from the fabulously disused studio, dusted off, refurbished, the pile of glazed donuts in a huge off-camera urn that'll be next to me. You know, whenever you see me go like this, it'll mean that another glazed donut bit the dust.
Yes. Can't wait. We cannot wait. I can't wait for that episode. That really is going to be a special episode.
Are you that keen on donuts?
Yeah, I am pretty keen on donuts, actually. Yeah.
All right.
I'm not as keen as for you eating donuts. I'm keen on me eating donuts, but yeah.
I don't mind you eating donuts as long as I get my urn full of glazed. You can do whatever you like. Sure, it's your tower.
Who?
I mean, I don't care.
What is your favorite donut provider?
You know, it's funny you asked that because I thought you were going to ask that just now. It hit me. You were going to ask that question. I'm not joking. Well, I'll tell you, local patriotism would force me to say the Dunkin'.
Really? Why for that reason?
Well, because, my family are heavily New England based, and the Dunkin' started out in New England. Dunkin' Donuts is yeah, I mean, they're literally on every street corner throughout New England. Although in New York, you'll generally find them for reasons not only the corporate, generally co-owning a store, coexisting in the store with 31 flavors. So you can get your glazed donut, or you can get a coffee ice cream cone, or both.
I actually do my coffee with Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts has coffee, and then they have a coffee creamer, and I actually use both. It's quite delicious.
Yeah, it is. It's quite good. But having said that, I am not immune to the charms of Winchel's when you can find them. I'm not immune to Krispy Kreme. I'm not immune to any one of the very fine independent donut shops we have floating around.
We actually have 3 near us. We have one on Foothill, one on 2nd Avenue, and one on Live Oak.
Yeah, and you've got one also on not Huntington. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting my geography. What is the major street with the Arcadia Library on it?
Santa Anita. Or
That's it. No,
Duarte
the
Road.
East-West Street. Duarte, that's it. On Duarte Road, there's the Peacock Donuts.
What? You're lying. You're so lying. You're trying to. There's no Peacock Donuts. That's ridiculous.
All right. Because you're so silly, I will help you with your issues. Peacock Donuts. Duarte.
Okay, I stand corrected. Ugh.
Arcadia. Yeah, there they are. Peacock Donuts still open, thank heaven.
Wow, I've never noticed that joint. Wow, that's right there.
Well, it's easy. It's easy to drive right by, but everything's homemade. It's very, very good. I really can't recommend it enough. I'm very fond of Peacock Donuts. Oh, and in the morning, they have these ham and cheese croissants. Oh,
I've been getting that from Starbucks actually near my near work. Ham and cheese croissants.
Try getting it from Peacock. They're big.
I got to do that. Yeah.
They're big, and the coffee's good too. They have these large coffee.
Did you mention Krispy Kreme?
I did.
Okay, good. Okay,
and
that rounds it out.
I mentioned Winchel's too.
Got to mention Winchel's. Yeah. Okay. So basically, you're in favor when it comes to donuts. You're in favor of diversity.
Oh, I definitely am. I'm not exclusive. I'm very inclusive when it comes to donuts. I'll eat as many of them from wherever they come as I can.
Yeah. Okay.
But Peacock, I am very, very fond of, and I really have to recommend highly.
Peacock, yeah. Okay.
The other nice thing about it is that you could, if you go there in the morning, you could just sort of hang out, read the newspaper, gobble pastries, and drink coffee. And the Chinese gentleman that runs it doesn't care how long you take.
All right. Yeah. That'll do it for this episode. So I have just one last question for you.
I've answered so many. All right, fine. What is it?
What is it if it's Monday?
Off the menu.
But what about the soul you save?
Could be your own. If you're lucky.
Yes. See you next time, everyone. Big episode. 200th episode.
200th episode from the cavernous depths of the Tumbler House Tower. Not from the meditation garden, but from the East Studio. Not even the West Studio, the East Studio. The West Studio, they tell me, is a lot prettier and much more lavish than the East Studio. They didn't have the West Studio when I was there last.
Charles coming home. The prodigal son returns.
Yeah, I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy. A Yankee Doodle do or die. The real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July. I've got a Yankee Doodle sweetheart. She's my Yankee Doodle joy. Oh, Yankee Doodle went to Vienna just to eat the Zuckertort. I am that Yankee Doodle boy. What?
All right,
what?
I'm going to watch that on the 4th of July. Yankee Doodle Dandy, everyone. Watch it if you haven't seen it.
But watch the Austrian version with German subtitles and Heinz Roman in the Jimmy Cagney role.
Okay. All right, I'll see you then, everyone.
God bless all.